Why do you think coding is so hard to learn, or is it being difficult to learn a sign that someone isn't cut out for it?
I would say, if you want to continue to have a career as a network engineer, better at least figure something the heck out.
Do you think that there's any potential for things like vibe coding to do good in terms of getting people interested in programming?
Well, my answer may surprise you.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Erica Dietrich, or Erica the Dev Online, and I am here with Elliot today for a very exciting conversation, friendly debate about what it takes for someone to learn how to code. Are certain people more suited toward coding, career paths, et cetera, et cetera? And before we go into it, I'm just going to let Elliot introduce himself and his background.
Okay, well, I'm Elliot Dierksen. I'm a network engineer for Greyson Technologies, which is a small Florida-based Cisco partner. Been in IT for like 40 years now. I started as kind of like a developer, actually some compiled C Basic, and then we moved into some Unix-based stuff. Xenix System 3, which, fun fact, Xenix is a licensed Unix port done by Microsoft. Anyway, and then went from there into like some Unix sysadmin, Oracle and Informix DBA, and then subsequently from there into networking. And I've been working for Cisco partners for 27 years now.
And you have a history of teaching people to code in some fashion. Do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Well, yeah, I mean, I started off as a programmer. The first programs I wrote were in BASIC, actually in high school. Big shout out to the public school system in Arlington County, Virginia, who,
Wow, yeah.
Had several different kinds of computer access for seventh graders in junior high school. And anyway, I started that, and then there were a few people, including one math teacher who, unfortunately, I cannot recall her name, but anyway, because the math teachers tended to own the computer lab stuff. But anyway, talking to her, talking to some other people that I was competing with for computer time, we helped teach one another how to do that. That was BASIC. The first real business program I wrote was Digital Research's compiled C Basic. And then from there, moving into some things like Informix. So any of the places that I worked, even early on as like a developer, just because I loved it. I couldn't have put it into words in seventh grade, but once I started playing this Star Trek game where you blow up Klingons and stuff like that, and I got decent at it, and then one day it went, how is it doing this? And it was all over at that point. It was all over. I've never had a plan B, even though, like I said, I couldn't have said it at the time, but because I enjoyed it. I would do that stuff in my free time. Even people at some of the first places I worked, we would hire people with bachelors in computer science, and I felt like I was helping teaching them how to code things in the real world, just because I really enjoyed it. And passion makes up for an awful lot sometimes.
True. I feel like I've heard a lot of people be invited into the world of programming via gaming as well.
Oh, yeah.
That seems to be a common avenue. And just for reference, what kind of applications, like what kinds of things did you tend to build? Did you stay in a certain lane, or how you have experience building a lot of different, if you could speak to that?
Well, a lot of it was like business stuff, and it had a little bit of an accounting bend. The first one that I did was actually it was a family business that they were doing kind of reservations wholesale, and they had like no system at all for that. And I actually came to Florida to my uncle that owned the company said, "Oh, you like computers? Maybe you can help us with this." And then 3 months later, when I thought I was coming down for 2 weeks for a vacation, like, I guess I live here and I guess this is my job. But doing the job and thinking like, what would make my job easier? All right, so how do I code to do that? that's a whole nother separate discussion, analysis and requirements gathering and stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that, and
Very true.
who's good at that and who's not. And there are definitely people in both camps on that one.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but yeah, just I read the books. We got the manuals for, let's see, it was Digital Researches compiled C Basic, and then they had, it was an ISAM library called Access Manager, to store the stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
um, on a multi-user CPM implementation from Televideo. So, but it just learning that stuff. And then from there, my uncle thought, hey, we can't be the only business that wants software that's more customized. So he sort of spun off a custom software company. And for a while, it was really just the two of us. And he was,
Mm-hmm.
sales and management, and I was the technical arm of it. And I would go out and talk to people and, ask them questions. Um, another funny one is one of them, it was, we were doing something, the first one that was really accounting related, and I thought, gosh, I don't know beans about accounting. So I went to the local community college and took Principles of Accounting 1, and actually still understand the difference between a debit and a credit, and I think I could probably
Hey, there you
still
go.
walk through what's entailed and where things line up on a balance sheet and stuff like that. But it just
I
was,
commend you too. Accounting's very boring. I had to take an accounting class.
but it's good stuff to know. If you're around business. But yeah, it was just one of those, okay, I see what we're going to do. All right, I guess I need to figure this stuff out, and just diving into it, and not being afraid of not having any idea what the heck I was doing. So
I have that same mentality. I can't. I'm not going to word it as perfectly as I worded it to somebody else like a year ago. But basically, like a problem is just a problem, and you learn what you have to solve it. Like whether that's technology related or otherwise. So I'm right there with you. Um, and I'll introduce myself in just a second. Well, actually, you know what? Let me just dive in, just for comparison, so kind of the perspectives of both speakers here. People know me, but I don't talk about my background that much because I think it's boring. But I I had a different route into programming. I had a whole other life and degree before this. I was a biology major. I ended up graduating, kind of jumping around food service, marketing, billing before I decided, hey, I'm very bored with this. And also, I don't make a living wage and I'm going to try software engineering. Um, Long story how I ended up getting into a Master of Software Engineering program. But even since graduating, I've had a very winding path. I have not just worked as a app developer, straight bread and butter software engineer. I spent a lot of time at Cisco Systems. So a lot of that was network automation or, I did a couple of web apps just for random ideas I had for improving stuff at the company, but a lot of network automation. I've done um, web apps for startups. I've done MVPs for cybersecurity companies. And typically, I'm a backend engineer. My stack has been C#, .NET, or Python, and whatever, SQL Server, MongoDB, whatever. And way less years of experience as well, obviously. So I've been in tech 7 years, and I have not coded for all 7 of those years because I've jumped around. So that's my background.
I just want to throw one thing in there because there's a local Votech school that I've done some volunteer stuff for, and I think one of the impressions that we give to younger people that's the
Hmm.
greatest disservice that I can think of is this notion that at 18 years old, you're supposed to know exactly what you want to do with the rest of your life. And you've got this straight line upward arc. And if you have
Yep.
anything like that, or anything that's not like that, that somehow you've failed. I mean, I'm trying to think of anyone that I know that has this, straight line progression career arc, even within IT related stuff. I've bounced around
Hmm.
and done everything. So I just I will rail about that sometimes, but I hate that we're creating that feeling for somebody. I mean, I I couldn't have put that. I told you I couldn't have put that into words at 13 or at 18 that I wanted to do this. It's just,
Oh,
well,
sure.
that seems cool, and whatever. My last comment on that is I feel incredibly fortunate. I found something that I like, that I'm reasonably good at. It pays reasonably well. As
Right.
as a trifecta goes, that doesn't suck. You
Yeah,
know?
the bar is low, but there's a bar. No, I'm just
Yeah.
kidding. But yeah. I won't rabbit hole too much, and I don't. My family is not mostly white collar background. They're definitely more blue collar background. But I feel like there's this notion that back in the day there was, you choose a trade or profession and then you stay there or with a company and loyalty, blah blah blah. So that from the perspective of somebody of my generation, I feel like there's that perception that that's how things used to be, at least. And it certainly at least isn't that way today. Um, yeah, I don't know if you have thoughts on that, but
Well, I, I'm definitely a different generation than you, but I will tell you, I arrived fairly early on at the conclusion that, my job security is in here. It's nowhere
yes.
else, because I've seen all all kinds of stuff. You know, y- you can do all the right things and end up, getting laid off somewhere through absolutely no fault of your own.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, follow Liz Ryan on LinkedIn. I like her perspective on stuff, but you are the captain of your own ship, and you got to
Ah,
pay
yes.
attention to that, and make sure you know where your ship is going, or at least not sleep on it, So
Mm-hmm. Invictus is my favorite poem. That's a fantastic quote. Before I jump into the like kind of guided questions, just to kind of talk about learning to code, coding education, careers, whatever. I don't want to do the disservice of you stating kind of where you sit along the spectrum of can anyone learn how to code. I'm gonna let you use your own words
okay.
to just kind of briefly sum up where that is.
Okay, well, I was thinking about this, and I think I kind of want to recast what I said in the comment on LinkedIn that got this whole thing going, and I'll reframe it in a self-deprecating way.
Oh.
If somebody says, like, Elliot, can you play golf? Yes, I can play golf. Am I
Uh-huh.
any good at golf? Absolutely not. So it depends what you're doing. I
Mm-hmm.
will say I am very much in the camp that if you enjoy doing something and you're passionate about it, you're probably going to be better about at doing it than somebody that just has a job. But you know, people's minds break down things in different ways. There. I mean, I participated in the sales process, but as a like technical pre-sales engineer and
Mm-hmm.
stuff. But boy, if I was a bag carrying salesperson with a quota, I'd be a lot poorer and a lot thinner. You know,
Yeah.
so I understand certain aspects of those things, but I just can't execute them. It just
Uh-huh.
doesn't make sense to me. And I think there's some aspect of that to coding, how you think about that. Like I've got this task that's this long, and I look at this and I start thinking about, okay, what do I got to do here? All right, are there pieces of this that I'm going to maybe use more than once? All right, so my first so basic was first, but then my next real programming language was C. So, I
Mm-hmm.
think of it in those terms and think about, all right, if this is something I'm going to do multiple times and this belongs in a function, and maybe I make a library of my functions. And so then as you do things over and over again, you increase the speed and you've
Yep.
already worked out all the kinks and these other things. So you're not having to debug something the same time. And even within that, um, little funny thing, the earliest versions of Cisco Call Manager had no concept of time-based routing for phone
Mm.
calls. So the only way you could do that was to use a tickle script on the voice gateways.
Uh-huh.
Now, I've done a bunch of procedural programming languages, and that's all fine. But anything that's a state machine, oh my goodness, that just makes blood run out of my ears. I managed for a customer that needed that. I managed to beat that into submission, but it was painful, and I had no idea. It just always felt awkward and painful. So
Uh-huh.
even within programming, I said procedural, all good. State machines, yeah, I'm out of here.
No, it's vast. I mean, it's vast. And the LinkedIn comment he's referencing is I wrote a LinkedIn article about a year now ago. I mean, it's been forever ago. It took me forever to get back to you. We were talking about this at Cisco Live last year, or we met at Cisco Live
Right.
last year. Excuse me. So my general shtick online is, the more sunshiny, anyone can learn to code. It takes the right support and education, blah blah blah. But obviously, there's always going to be people who are better programmers than others. I don't think everyone can be, the most amazing programmer or program the same types of projects. But in general, as a general statement, I think that anyone can learn how to code, and that's beneficial today. Um, so that's my statement. You have any questions on mine before I just go into some questions?
No, I mean, yeah, I think anybody can, but the question is whether you're really going to be good at it is the other part. And then also to your point, if I'm doing something that's a one-time thing or something that I run, once a month, does it matter if it's gorgeous and the most efficient thing? No, not really, even though I, struggle with the perfectionism thing. But if you're writing something where you're trying to process, 500,000 online transactions every second, well, that's a different story.
Yep. Um, I'll go ahead and just dive in. Why do you think coding is so hard to learn, or is it being difficult to learn a sign that someone isn't cut out for it?
Um, I don't know. I guess to me, it's more of I focus more on the ability to break the tasks down in a logical way. I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
think for the most part, anybody can figure out aspects of the, syntax and things like that, but it's just it's much harder if you struggle with how do you eat an elephant, one bite at a time. If you struggle with that part of it, I think that's going to make it more challenging. And I mean, honestly, I worked with somebody at one place who had a master's degree in computer science, and they were a nice person, an intelligent person, but, and I didn't feel like they could code their way out of a wet paper bag.
Oh, wow.
Um,
Yeah, there's definitely a big gap in, I studied computer science or whatever, and I can actually build something or
mhm.
build something the right way. Um, I lost my train of thought in terms of um so I agree with you that the difficult part is like programmatic mindset. I use different words sometimes for explaining the same thing, but programmatic mindset, being able to think through a problem logically, or how can I apply code to this problem to solve it. Um and I that is something that I focus a lot on my in my courses, right? Is not syntax, right? Because that's Googleable, that's AIable, but AI and Google can't teach you how to think. It can't teach you how to problem solve. So, to be fair, I think that we don't historically have a lot of programming education that tries to teach people how to think programmatically. I do think it's a matter of, oh, you either caught on or you didn't, and we focus on, oh, learn a language, here's Python. I'm going to take you to the modules of, variables, functions, whatever. And then you either figure out how to piece it together to problem solve or you don't. Um, I don't think we have a lot of data on, is it possible to teach people to think that way? Because, in school, for instance, I mean, I assume this is the same for you, but, there was a heavy emphasis on like teaching people how to critically think. And, that's a very hard thing to teach, but that is something we aspire to teach people.
Yeah.
We had certain methods of encouraging it. Some people never quite got there, but um, I think that's where it is difficult to prove, because there's just not a lot of people out there trying to teach that and really not giving up on that. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's hard because I mean my wife tells me I have a lot of patience on stuff, and I do always want to try and explain things to people, but every once in a while, you can just tell somebody is having one of those doink moments,
Yeah.
and you're trying to explain this to them, and in your head you're going like, I I don't know how to restate this. This makes perfect sense to me, and I don't know where I'm missing on communicating this concept to them, but you can look in their eyes and go that this is whiffing for them. And you know a lot of times I can get around it, but sometimes it's like I don't know what to
Mm-hmm.
do. I don't know what to tell you. And you know, I've worked very hard at my craft, and I spent my free time, and like a lot of this lab stuff you see is mine just because I'm a geek. I enjoy
Yeah, you
playing with
enjoy
this
it.
stuff
Yeah.
even in time off. um, but the concepts always made sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
There's been very few things, with the exception of state machines, that when I tried to understand them, that I just went, I don't get it. This hurts.
Uh-huh. I'm probably gonna end up jumping all over the place, so we'll see how in order these questions actually go. But this might be a statement on how I view teaching as well too. And it might be kind of extreme, but I'm of the philosophy that if somebody does not learn something, it's the teacher's fault. Like it's my fault. Not in a bad way. I did a bad job, but I think it's like a teacher's responsibility to meet people where they're at.
Yeah.
I do think it's extremely difficult, to your point, because I mean, programming for the most part came naturally to me as well. I mean, it's still hard, right? It's not easy, but
No.
I really enjoyed the classes. I thought I would struggle because I don't love math, but logic was, like that.
Yeah.
That just made sense. Um, but yeah, I think that it's on the teacher. So I think it depends on where you fall on that spectrum too.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna laugh and say, you're going like, original Karate Kid there with, no such thing, bad student, only bad teacher.
Yeah, I do feel that way. Yeah.
Um, and that's the challenge, because everybody does think a little differently,
Hmm.
and you can't necessarily use the same way with everyone. And I like to use, you want to try and find some sort of analogy or something that makes sense to people,
Hmm.
but without being patronizing. And that's where, it gets challenging sometimes, especially with people that you don't know really well. Um, is trying to find that balance. Like, I want to break
Yes.
this down enough that it makes sense to you without you feeling like I'm talking to you like you're a 5-year old.
Right. It's difficult too because I mean I compare learning to program a lot like learning to read, which I don't know if you agree with that or not. It's
Well,
you'll go ahead and answer before I continue.
well, I was going to say, at one point, I kind of likened programming to translation. You're taking a
Mm-hmm.
task or a concept, and then you're translating it into a programming language so that the computer can do it. Um, I will say, I think there's one thing where I differ from the majority on this,
Mm-hmm.
which is, I think some people really want this notion that you don't need to understand what you're doing. You just need to be a good
Oh yeah.
programmer, and some analyst will break this down for you. And I don't buy that for a second.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you don't need to understand all the ins and outs, but if you have no idea what you're trying to accomplish,
Right.
it just seems like you're setting yourself up for failure there. So, um, I know that's kind of out of the mainstream, maybe, but I feel pretty
Oh no, I
strongly
agree
about
with
that.
you. I agree with you. And to the point on the reading. So right, like when it comes to reading, again, different generations. So you got to correct where how you were educated on these things. But this is one of those things where they're like everybody must learn to read. So I don't care what we got to do to get it down down your throat in your brain. You are going to read. We had like Hooked on Phonics, Scholastic Book Fairs, like all these programs to help students who are falling behind. Just a ton of research on like how do you best teach people to read? How do you teach them to read quickly? What's the highest reading level you can get the average person to? What counts as literacy? And I'm not saying that teaching programming has to reach that level of anal retentiveness necessarily, but it feels like with programming, it's just kind of here's the material and you either get it or you don't. And I mean, there's a lot of smart people out there and people who are going to take to it naturally, but I think that we don't really know. Like, how do we know that people can't learn because we don't really try very many methods of teaching people? You know what I mean?
Well, actually, I hadn't thought of this before the conversation, but just the way
Mm-hmm.
you were describing that made me think of one of the kids who's really not into math,
Mm-hmm.
but they did something, and I don't remember what the heck the language was, but it was something, it was fairly high level, so it was simpler to program in, but they were having the kids write a game. So if you really want to get into it, for the most part, like, okay, that's, it's like reading comic books or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
in the context of teaching someone to read. Like, maybe that's not, the best, most
Oh
educational
yeah,
thing,
yeah.
but if you're getting somebody to be interested in it, and then they read, well, it's almost like you're tricking them a little bit. You
Yeah.
find something that interests them, and he was able to do that. And he has shown, other than as a consumer of technology, he's shown no other interest. But you find, or I find that that's a good way to get people there, is to find something that they're interested in and tie that together. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and now I've mentioned this in a lot of different forums, like a lot of them around the artist formerly known as DevNet and stuff like that, on Cisco Learning Network, or in the communities. People are just like, oh, this is how you learn to code in Python and blah 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 and all this stuff. But it's just this kind of arbitrary, esoteric sort of thing. And you look at it
Uh-huh.
and go, okay, it's like looking at a table full of Lego pieces and going, okay, I know I could build something from this, but what do I do? And my thing that I've said over and over to people is, pick something small, something that, but
Mm-hmm.
something that matters to you, that you understand, and then you can write this. And if it saves you, 10 minutes doing that, you can go, okay, cool. This is a task I understand, and it's something that's, either difficult or just tedious to do. And now I automate this, and I have something real and tangible from that. And that starts to make the concepts make more sense. But if it's just this esoteric thing, like, write something to compute the, value of
Oh, it's
pi to the
boring.
last
Yeah.
significant digits, like, why? That's not very
Mm-hmm.
interesting.
Feels like
um
a waste of time.
yeah. So
So you're teaching philosophy, like at least the start of it is you have to meet people where they are to get them interested. Like,
right.
why would you care about this, or what do you actually want to solve or build?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same in, I'll say, in networking. Even when you're laying out a network for, post sales, or when you're talking to somebody potentially trying to sell them something, you get into something that's, time out. What are you trying to accomplish? And then start from there. But with the programming, I think you sort of hit on it here. Is you got to find something that makes that relevant to something that interests them, because then it's going to be more of a, okay, this has some potential to do something for me, versus this is, apologies to people that love this, but, oh, I have to write a book report on Moby Dick. Oh goody.
Uh-huh.
um,
Right.
because that feels tedious. But, if you do something that ties in with something that does interest them, like the kids, where they wrote a little simplistic game, and they're like,
Mm-hmm.
they like to computer games, and, oh, we're doing something that, ties in with something I'm interested in. Oh, that was kind of cool. And I would have to imagine that there were some people that, like, oh, that's neat. Maybe I can do something with that. And that, creates that spark. So,
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think that that has not been explored enough either, like finding ways to interest people that they can relate to, because I mean, I think gaming is the very common one. So
oh
like
yeah.
when I was in my master's program, almost every professor was like, "Oh, so when you play a game, this that, or have you ever played this?" Okay, it's kind of like and I remember sitting in there, and I'm not anti-gaming, but I was much more of a like sports and outdoors kind of person. And I just like it did not hit me in the heart or wherever it was supposed to. So I feel like we could do a better job of like here are things that you've interacted with in daily life that you could build, or like imagine the possible, outside of gaming.
Yeah. Well, so you were making me think of two different things. One of them was, a big shout out to, I'll let you guess the ethnic heritage of my statistics and math teacher, Daniel Patrick McSweeney, um, but who probably saved me in high school because I flunked out of chemistry, but he knew I was interested in computers.
Uh-huh.
And so he took me on as a lab aide for one period, and I got
Mm-hmm.
credit for that and helped some of the other students while he was doing other things. But he had me do something in statistics, which sounds dreadful to a lot of people, I'm sure. But I was looking at the different precincts in Arlington County and seeing where the breakdown of these different precincts ranked with how the county as a whole voted. And I
Mm-hmm.
found it fascinating that there was this one precinct, and yeah, I can be a little bit of a math nerd if you hadn't already figured that out. But um, but I found there was this one particular precinct that was within just a couple of percentage points of where the county voted as a whole over like a
Mm-hmm.
10-year span. So if you were trying to see where, as a candidate, where you stood, you could focus your polling on this. And, it also gave me a little bit of a chance at leadership because I was on a project with some other people. Now I did all the coding, but
Mm-hmm.
the people that were on my team, like I gave them, all right, you're going to input the data for these different years and we'll crunch that and stuff. So it was, a little bit of working as a team. But then the other one, I'm thinking of your sports analogy, that way back in the days before like fantasy football and fantasy baseball, there was a company called Stratomatic that had
Mm-hmm.
simulation football and baseball games, and we had leagues with drafts and everything. And I actually wrote a computer program that I would take the cards, particularly in baseball, take the cards from players and enter information about them because sometimes the cards didn't reflect what their stats
Oh,
were.
okay. Uh-huh.
So I did this to do this like massive draft analysis for when we did this to which players I was going to draft. But it is fun because I liked computing, but then I also enjoyed playing the game, and I used the programming to, I like to think, give myself an
Uh-huh.
edge over some of the people that I was playing against because they're looking at somebody's bottom line, but then you have this one guy with Midland stats, but he, right-hander that hits
Uh-huh.
lefties really well. So you can do a platoon thing, and he looks like nothing, and you can draft him and, use him to his best abilities. Anyway, um,
I will say too, I'm very jealous of people like you who like early on had an interest in computers, and just knew that, or just found yourself doing, asking more like, fixing things that are broken, or how does this work, or taking things apart, all that. I think that's such a huge, huge advantage. But anyway, made me think of this. Have you heard of the vibe coding trend? I can explain
yeah.
it really quickly if you don't.
Oh
Okay,
no,
okay, yeah, okay.
I've heard of it. I was just thinking of the joke where vibe coding, where one programmer can create 10 years worth of technical debt in a weekend. But
Yeah. So this is, because I work with network engineers a lot who, maybe drag their feet sometimes learning how to code, and some of them have really like gotten excited about vibe coding. I've been trying to find like the upside of this, right? And this is related to what you were saying, I promise. But do you think that there's any potential for things like vibe coding to do good in terms of getting people interested in programming? Like, okay, you created a prompt and you brought this vision of something you find interesting to life. And now does that motivate you to learn it and to be able to build things like it?
well, my answer may surprise you, but I'm going
Yeah.
to say absolutely yes, because it goes from that. All right, we have this esoteric concept of programming in a fairly short amount of time. You've got something tangible that does something that you need or something that you wanted to do. So that shows you what's possible. Um,
Mm-hmm.
where I would swing back in the other direction is just because you vibe coded it over the weekend doesn't mean you should push that to production on Monday. You know,
Right. Right.
um,
And for anyone listening who doesn't know what vibe coding is, it's coding with AI and then either not understanding the output or not looking at it. Basically the same thing, right? You're just not reviewing it. Um, so I will say that when this came out, I was very much against it because it takes away all that friction, right? There's so much friction when it comes to learning programming and then getting better at it, and I think it creates this false sense of expertise, right? So I've had to really come around because again, I believe that the teacher has to meet the student, right? I've had to really come around and I've seen how people have really taken to and become interested in programming because of vibe coding. And I've had to kind of flip it on its head and be like, okay, you know what? I'm not going to tell you the vibe coding's bad or to never touch it, but these are the reasons that you now want to go back and learn how to actually build what you're generating.
Yeah, I mean, if it builds that spark and gets you to something that you can actually use in a quicker way, then you can start to see the value of it. And I promise I'll stop railing about this, but you put you put code into production that you don't understand how it works, and then when things go sideways, then you're looking at this going, I have no idea what the heck this thing is doing.
Mm-hmm.
Make one other, super graybeard reference. I don't think it still exists, but way back when, there was this thing called the International Obfuscated C Code Contest.
Okay.
And here's the kicker: the object is to write a program that compiles and does something that nobody can figure out what it does. That's uber
I
nerdy.
want to look into this now. I don't know if this still exists. That's hilarious.
Yeah, you'll find it. At the very least, I'm sure there are Wikipedia links to that. But I always found that terribly amusing.
And that's the thing too. You keep mentioning like where you draw the lines, like pushing vibe coded things to production, and I think that's where I struggle, because I think that the point of building is not necessarily to just have a result or have something, right? It's the investment in yourself. It's the gaining of the skill. It's a way of thinking about the world and solving problems. And, again, you use AI and okay, you get this great app idea you have, but you don't have any of that skill set, right? I worry about people relying on these tools and then, oh, the subscription goes up or the model starts sucking or whatever. And you're just left high and dry. That is something that can be taken away from you,
yeah, I mean that there are degrees in everything. I mean, I, I I will confess to have probably been a more reluctant user of AI things. And hopefully this isn't like too much of a commercial, but I heard better things about Claude as it
Mm-mm.
pertains to coding related stuff. So I had this uh, really actually pretty hideous shell script that I wrote for something collab related to build these horribly formatted CSV files for importing bulk voice gateways into Call Manager. And it worked, but it was really tedious and for a long time. And like, gosh, I'd really like to get this into Python since I'm doing more Python these days. And, in a couple hours in an afternoon, there was some back and forth because I did that and then one thing didn't work quite right. And, one of those annoying things about that is you go back to it and go, hey, yes, but this didn't work. And they're like, hey, you're right. That doesn't work. Like, why
Uh-huh.
are you so excited? And why did you tell me something that didn't work the first time?
Oh, of
But,
course, yeah.
but,
Absolutely.
but that was really useful. I don't use that all that much, but I spend more time doing Python than anything else now. So
Uh-huh.
having this tool in Python that perhaps I could, bang on a few corners and use for something else down the road was handy. And like,
You are
oh,
very right that it's great for translating between languages.
yeah,
I will definitely say that. But again, I would still argue, like for instance, if you found yourself needing to use Python now and maybe for some reason you didn't know Python much yet, the fact that you know how to think programmatically, I mean, you learn languages, right? The first one is the hardest to learn.
oh
And then
yeah.
after that, so I still feel like there's that need.
Yeah, I mean it's critical thinking, analytical thinking, whatever you call it, but the way you break that down, and I will say one of the things because at first I'm feeding this fairly large shell script to Claude. I'm going, man, I wonder what the heck this is going to look like, and it actually made what I would consider to be reasonable guesses about where it broke things out into functions and how it did the flow of them and stuff like that. So I'm like, oh, okay, that's not too bad. Now I subsequently, banged on a few corners there to do things a little bit differently. Oh, what is that like? Config parser. As I say, I
Mm,
love, 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 love that library because you can have a script and a local config file depending on what
uh-huh.
you're doing. For me, it's different customer directories, and I have one there, and I just use the script, and it pulls all the right variables. So I'm integrating instead of having like 475 command line
Oh
arguments to
yeah.
this to this thing to pull some of that stuff in through config parser. Um,
There's definitely no denying that AI has made coding programming, whatever. I say coding just to be general,
Yeah.
but programming easier and learning to program easier. I am trying to do that in my course. Again, I'm kind of experimenting here, but
Yeah. Well, I think that's something if you can describe what you want to do, and then if AI gives you back something that's at least halfway decent, you you can look at that and then, you know, where I would say where you could tell somebody's a programmer, they're like, oh, I see what it's doing there, and I could use that somewhere else for something else. That's the kind of stuff that I think really puts the spotlight on somebody that, yeah, your mind works the right way to do this kind of stuff. Um,
okay, that's a great segue because I'm gonna start banging out a few questions
okay.
just so that I have some sort of structure to this hour. What must someone possess to learn how to code? Is it a certain aptitude, a skill set, dedication, way of thinking, whatever?
Um, I'd probably start with a way of thinking or way of breaking things down.
Hmm.
You certainly you need some some dedication and determination and all that sort of stuff. And sometimes it's not fun when you run up against a brick wall and you're bashing your head against it for a while trying to get something to work. But um, yeah, it's that the way you think and the way you break things down that to me is the biggest differentiator.
What would you call that? Like people who think in terms of logic, or like how
I,
would you?
I mean, I think for me, I'd maybe call that like an analytical mindset.
Hmm.
Um, I, I I can't think of a like perfect adjective for
Yeah,
that, but I think that's as close as I can get.
makes sense. I think from my teaching so far, the thing that I see people struggle with the most in terms of who actually learns how to code and who doesn't is that dedication piece. I mean, because it's a skill, right?
Mm.
Everybody wants to just, oh, I watched a video and now I know how to program. And then when they don't have that instant gratification, right? Because again, even for me, right, it came naturally, but there's a big difference between I watched the lecture or the video and then I can actually apply it or build something. And it's the people who are like willing to sit through the pain, willing to sit through building things that are boring, not like a calculator, but
Right.
you can build cooler things as you know more and gain skill. I
Yeah.
mean, I think there's no chance for someone who doesn't have the dedication, whether they're being forced to be dedicated or they're willing to be dedicated.
Yeah, and this is more with I guess my mentor hat on and like going way back to even early in my programming career and making a very dated Unix reference in this one. Like I have no problem answering questions for people and helping, but you know I, I don't want to be your man page.
Yeah,
Like if you ask me the same question three, four, five times, I'm going to start to get grumpy.
same.
And as a mentor, what I want to see is it's okay. It's a bad use of your time if you spend 3 weeks banging on something that you could ask me or somebody else a question, and I can steer you in the right direction fairly quickly. But by the same token, you know, somebody that just goes like, "That's hard. Will you do that for me?" No, no, I will not.
I
Um,
gotta teach them to fish.
Exactly. I mean, the people that I'm going to be excited about helping out are the ones that are going to go, "Hey, I was trying to do this and I couldn't get it to work. I tried this, but I got this error, and then I tried this, whatever." So you can see, all right, I haven't just gone, it's hard. I quit. Help me. You've applied some, thought and energy to this. And I'm there for that all day, but if you just want to, you know, do this for me, tie my shoes. I may not outright tell you no, but I'm certainly not going to be excited about it. Uh,
I think that's a hard mindset to instill in junior programmers too, because I fell on the opposite side of the spectrum. I wasn't annoyingly asking questions. I was annoyingly unwilling to ask questions, right? I would sit there with it for 3 weeks and then, have a meltdown because I couldn't figure it out still, right? And had to finally bring somebody in. So I agree with you, but I think it's hard to get people to do that in practice.
yeah, and it's squishy. That's the part that's really hard is it's squishy. It once you get through it, and I can. I can admit at times you have a real thorny problem and you finish and, at the end you get it done and, I'm going to look at the display and go, I beat you,
Yeah.
like it's a, mortal combat between you and the computer on something. So you remember those more when you kind of learn those lessons yourself. But again, you don't want to be dumb about it. And then particularly in like a business context, if you've got something, you got a project deadline, if you spend 3 weeks on something, and even if you solve it, now you're behind on everything else and you drag the whole rest of the project down. But yeah, it's squishy. There are no hard and fast rules. So
For sure. I'm gonna hard hit onto another question because
okay.
I'm gonna respect your time here. But you touched on in terms of teaching, trying to find things that students are interested in, and that's kind of the gateway into getting them to be dedicated or whatever, pursue programming. Are there other best practices that you found are really effective or ineffective at teaching people how to program?
Um, it's been I do less of teaching people to program now. I mean, I do some of it around the network automation stuff, but a lot of times it's going to be more asking a question. And actually, I'll go back to what I'm sure my children hated of me when they were in school. Like, Dad, how do I spell this? I'm like, I don't know. How do you think you spell that?
Oh,
And you try to like, no, as an old roommate said, you got to use that thing for more than a hat rack. So I'm gonna,
as a child, thinking back to being a daughter, that's really annoying to hear you say that. But as a teacher, I'm like, I know exactly why he said that.
yeah. I mean that's the key. I think in the teaching is not necessarily to just give somebody the answer, but
Mm-hmm.
to maybe help them to, it's like, I know where to go on this, but what I want to teach you is, all right, you're running into this. How can I reframe your thoughts to get to like
Mm-hmm.
lead you to the answer instead of just going, here's the answer, take a hike. Because
Yep.
you haven't actually taught anybody anything when you do that. If you teach them how to get there or how to look for the answer, then you've taught them something.
Right. Totally agree. And again, I think that's a huge gap with teaching, right? Because you've got a lot of people who are kind of on their own island learning how to program for one reason or another. Either
Hmm.
they're self teaching or, in my case, right, taking university courses where no one's interested in if you learn it or not, and no one wants to work together. So you're just kind of on your own. I do think that you need somebody who's there to, like you said, reframe your thoughts, redirect, hey, have you tried looking in this direction? I mean, even encouragement, to be honest.
Oh yeah.
And so I don't know. I think there's this other missing piece of the conversation. A lot of people think, well, if you can't just learn it by yourself, then you're not good enough to learn it. And I don't know. I don't think that's accurate.
Well, I mean, you never know who's gonna have the aptitude for that kind of stuff. I'm drawing a mental blank on what the, left brain versus right
Yeah.
brain thing is on that. And sometimes people that you wouldn't necessarily think do really well at something like that. But that's really the key. It's like sometimes I, as much as I love that one teacher in particular, and there were a lot of other teachers that really had a big impact on me, even though I tried my best to not learn anything, but somehow managed to
Unless you're
accidentally.
honest.
Yeah, but finding that way to lead them to think, it takes more time to do that versus going, oh, when you have to sort a linked list, this is how you do that, versus think about what you're doing and how you go about doing that thing. Hey, there's a way back, huh? Linked
Yeah,
lists.
yeah, yeah.
But it takes more time, but I think you get more out of that.
Hmm.
Try and scale the ramp back, but it's like the, high stakes standardized testing. They're teaching you a lot of times to memorize answers, not necessarily to actually learn things.
Yep.
The intent behind it is good. You're trying to, test whether somebody learns something, but then you end up teaching people to pass the test as
Yep.
opposed to actually learning things.
I
So,
definitely struggled with that before getting into tech because everything was memorization.
yeah.
And I hopefully you're okay with this. I did not put this in the document, but I was inspired by this conversation to kind of close out with this question because you are in networking now. Um, so when it comes to network engineers learning how to code, right? I mean, this has been a big push, right? People
Oh
learning
yeah.
network automation, now learning how to use AI, blah, blah, blah. Um, what would you say in terms of can any network engineer learn how to code? Should they be learning how to code?
Well, I'm closer to the end of my career, um, but I would say, if you want to continue to have a career as a network engineer, you better at least figure something the heck out, or you're gonna, you're going to be kind of relegated to the dustbin or relegated to, crummier work assignments.
Uh-huh.
But so you have to learn some of it, but it is really interesting because having had that programming background, even though I kind of moved away from it, I moved away from it because I ended up writing the same kind of apps over and over again. And it wasn't that
It
I
gets boring.
hated it, but it's just like it just isn't as much fun as it used to
Yep.
be. And then the networking thing appealed to me, and that went pretty well. Um, I've been really surprised at the number of people like, no, I got into networking because I didn't want to have to code. Like,
Hmm.
well, I got some bad news for
I know, I know.
you.
Terrible for them.
Well, I mean, there's so many things that you can do with that to help make yourself, more efficient, less errors, and have to spend less time on tedious, crummy stuff. You know,
Hmm.
it's going to vary depending on where you are, how much of that you need. But I think you've got to at least be aware of it, or you're going to be missing the boat.
I know a lot of network engineers complain about that too, right? Because they were trying to avoid learning how to program, but I think we see it across tech. Like, there's not a single engineering role that just gets to stay in one lane anymore. There's
No,
like this constant cross-functional knowledge needed, and unfortunately, that means programming for network engineers too. And I mean, again, I think to the point of can anyone learn it? I think you just don't really have a choice. I think you have to. It
yeah.
doesn't have to be the thing you're best at.
No, but you've got to at least have some awareness. And you made me think of something that's another kind of one of my uh, stock rants on things. But you you get into some places, and actually networking was a really big one where you get this silo, and so it's like, I know everything about this little silo, and then I step half a
Yep.
step outside of this and I don't know anything about that. You know, there's certainly some value in somebody with some really specialized knowledge, but there's more value in somebody that knows, like, okay, I got readings from an IoT sensor in a farm field over here that
Mm-hmm.
I've got to get to this database over here in this data center so I can monitor, is this particular crop getting the right amount of water, and are the nutrients in the soil right? Somebody that can bring all those things together and see across all of that, because I mean, goodness, how many times have you ended up with a bunch of siloed experts going, it's not me, it's not me, it's not
All
me,
the
it's not
time.
me. And somebody's got to go, no, no, no. How does all this stuff tie together? And we got to work through this.
That
So,
is validating to hear you, Elliot,
yeah,
say that because that's how I am. I feel like that's an unappreciated type of
yeah.
person.
Well, some people appreciate it, maybe not as much as they should, but at 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 the end of the day, you've got this big thing, this journey of 1,000 miles, and you may know your one block super well, but just because your one block is perfect, if you can't traverse the whole road, then it kind of all amounts to nothing. So
Right.
so
I completely agree. Elliot, it has been awesome to have you on. I'm sorry that you had to wait so long
oh, it's fine. I'm
to
glad we
have
got to
your
do it.
wisdom and knowledge heard. That's totally my fault. But the great conversation, I think people are going to enjoy it. Is there anything that you would like to promote? Any work that you're doing that you'd like people to follow before I end it here?
Um, Well, actually, the thing that I'll say is, I had a longtime friend of mine ask me something about some of the volunteer stuff I was doing, and he's like, when we were, 20 somethings and friends, like, I don't remember you being this altruistic, which is a fair statement. Um, and I don't know, I don't even feel like I'm the
You
most
don't have to out
altruistic
yourself,
things, but
on this. Yeah.
but what I think of is I think of the people that early in my career that helped me with things.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing that I could do for those people. Some of them, they may have passed away. I've lost touch with them. But in thinking about what those people did for me, I I think what they would appreciate is if I can take what I have learned and pay that forward a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
and that to me is really gratifying. I had one on LinkedIn lately where somebody, I think I just exchanged a couple of messages, and I think I sort of poked at him a little bit about, just go ahead and take this test. Don't, spend 6 years studying for your CCNA before you
Uh-huh.
actually take the exams, something like that. And then he thanked me for that. And it's like, wow, that was cool. I didn't feel like I really did that much, but it was nice to feel
You
like
save a lot of
it,
time and frustration.
yeah, it feel like it had an impact on
Mm-hmm.
somebody else. That's really gratifying. So
So are you trying to say that your LinkedIn DMs are open? Is that what you're trying to say right now?
um I'm pretty open.
Tentatively open. Okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty open unless you're trying to sell me something that I don't need. But I would say for the most part, for technical folks, my default on that is open, and I'm happy to share um, what I know. I mean, I try and do that with you know articles that I've written on LinkedIn or in Cisco Learning Network, those sorts of things. So that's really what all of those are about, is trying to pass
Yep.
on the thing that I have learned, and hopefully make some, give some value to somebody else for that, because there are people that did that for me that I
Yep.
can never repay.
You heard it here, folks. Elliot's worth reaching out to. He knows his stuff. He knows a lot of stuff.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Elliot. And if you have any questions on this episode, as always, feel free to leave them down in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.
All right. Thanks again. Good talk.